I felt that if that jury had no prior exposure to the facts in this case, and it just looked at the evidence, not inference from that evidence relating to strong inference bordering on conjecture or surmise or guesswork, that the issue wasn't whether or not he might have committed this act, but whether it's been proved beyond a reasonable doubt and whether every reasonable hypothesis of innocence was excluded. And when I viewed it, I didn't feel that 12 impartial people could find that the state put on that quantum of evidence where a person could say beyond a reasonable doubt David Hendricks was the only person that could have done this, because I don't think that existed.
The family of Mrs. Hendricks said yesterday that she thought David might prefer death to a life imprisonment. Has he expressed any similar views?
He has never expressed that view to me, and I, just so that I won't seem somewhat out of place, will not comment on anything that the Hendricks or Palmer family might have said. I'm sure they're good and honest people, but I don't wish to comment on any of their statements.
Has Mr. Hendricks expressed the opposite feeling?
I don't wish to comment on any. No, he has not expressed an opinion on that. We have not discussed that. We've discussed more of an affirmative, progressive action trying to aid him in his further efforts to be acquitted. That's the only thing we've discussed.
Mr. Dozier suggested that perhaps his own testimony on his own behalf may not have helped him.
I have heard that. I've heard him express that opinion.
And your opinion?
My opinion is that I guess I am just not a very good judge of these things. What David Hendricks said on the stand, and a day and a half's worth of testimony, is what he's been telling me all along. I believe that he was truthful. I think that any one of us, if our private lives were held up to the scrutiny of the public eye as his private life was held up to the scrutiny of the public eye, might be, shall we say, a little less than candid about our intentions with respect to whether or not we were a little more sexually attuned than one would possibly think. But you see, the thing that scares me about all of this is that whether or not he committed axe murder, let alone one, but mass axe murder, and let alone mass axe murder, but his entire family, on the strength of the evidence that was presented, when the state acknowledges no overt sexual activity other than what the jury heard, and in light of the fact that the only witnesses put on with respect to his religion indicate that he didn't do anything that would even warrant being set aside or silenced, but merely reprimanded, seems to me to be far-fetched without a showing by some bit of evidence of a connection between that type of activity with the models, his religious and emotional well-being, and the killings themselves. I can't make that logical conclusion that apparently the ladies and the gentlemen of the jury could make. I still cannot make it. I'm still having problems with it, and that's one reason why I'm going to continue, at least for the time being an advocate for him and trying to get this thing reversed.
Your partner, Mr. Jennings, said yesterday that he felt that the way Hendricks shows reaction emotionally to things is part of the reason he's in the trouble he's in. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that 100%.
Have you talked to David about that kind of thing?
Sure.
What's he say? I mean, what's he telling you about?
Well, I'm just acting and being myself. What should I be? And we look at him blankly and say, look, be yourself. We can't coach you and tell you how to act. And I think you will note, since I presume that the ladies and gentlemen of the press are astute observers of the human condition, that every single member of his religion and family have somewhat the same affect when asked about things. I am surprised at that affect, but it exists notwithstanding, and it would be a terrible thing, would it not, the man be convicted of murder on the basis of his affect.
You indicated he was telling you everything that he said on the stand, or vice versa. Can you account for us the discrepancy between the midnight and 11 p.m. departure hour?
I can tell you what we felt the evidence showed. He told the press, I think the Daily Pantagraph, that's the name of the paper, early on when he was asked that he left around 11 o'clock. He told me when I first met him that he left around 11 o'clock. He was up approximately 50 hours, or at least 48 hours, when he was interrogated all night long by the police. And it is my personal opinion that an answer to a question was, well, you mean you left around midnight? That he probably answered yes to that. And from that came this discrepancy of an hour. I don't believe that discrepancy exists. I believe that if he left around midnight, there would be at least an indication from the Perkins check that the check time would show the 8th of November, where in point of fact it showed before midnight. I think he left when he said he left, and I think the evidence shows that he left when he said he left.
And the Perkins check does say that he left on before midnight?
My indication or my recollection of the evidence was that it did, that it was a check that showed that it was issued on December 7th, but there was no time on it. November 7th, but there was no time on it, and that would make it prior to 12.
And his being seen leaving his house at 9 p.m.
He has adamantly denied that, consistently adamantly denied that, and I think, again, this is an example of you have to look at all of the evidence. In the first instance, the witnesses gave a story that they saw a blue car. When questioned later, they saw a blue car and a man. When questioned the very last time, they not only saw a blue car and a man, but the blue car was parked in the driveway and the man walking toward it was David Hendricks. Now, it took 6 months to bring out information that the very first night that one of the witnesses was questioned, he had absolutely no knowledge of. And they say, well, he wasn't asked those questions, but I find that difficult to believe.
These are first, second, and third questionings by the police, you mean?
These are first, second, and third interviews over a period of 6 months before they finally have the result that was testified to in this courtroom. And that was brought out in cross-examination.
Does Mr. Hendricks at any time in his life have any previous record?
Nothing. I mean, outside of perhaps a traffic offense.
Has there been any history of emotional or psychological problems?
Absolutely none.
If you could do the 10 weeks over again, and in fact, maybe you'll get the chance if you get a new trial, is there anything you would do differently?
No.
Pick a different jury?
If we get a chance to do this trial over again, we'll obviously have a different jury. But that jury was picked intelligently, if not, when I say intelligently, I mean with cognition and with intent and willfully by us. We wanted that jury.
But my real question is, would you still go with a jury trial versus a bench trial?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, that's the best thing we've got going.
And you said you were shocked by the verdict. Did you then hold out any hope at all that Judge Boehner might issue still a directed verdict?
No, we did not.
Would you,
He said that he really felt bad for Hal and I. And that's struck me as odd. I don't know if I would be as compassionate toward anybody around me if I were in the same position. But that's exactly what he said. He said that he felt sorry for Hal and I.
And that affected you?
Yeah, it did.